Imagine getting 4 pawns stacked in a row. It seems impossible. I mean, how can you even get that many pawns to travel to one file? Well, it happened twice. And today we're going to explore both of those games. Let's jump straight into the first one. This game was played between two very strong players. White has become a grandmaster and black is an international master. Now, white opens by playing d4 and c4, and we get into the King's Indian defense. And within the King's Indian defense, we have a very topical main line. The focus of this video is not necessarily the opening stage, but I will still try to provide some insights where I can. So both players playing very naturally, white on the queen side, as is typical, and black on the king side, in response trying to open up files for their pieces, diagonals for their bishops, and in general start forming some sort of attack. So f5, we have knight g5, knight f6, bishop f3. Now, I think this is one moment that could be useful. A lot of players would look at this knight and instinctively think it's a really good knight. I mean, look at this juicy e6 square. It's going to be a fork there, and it's just a really strong knight, and if they take, okay, we force them to get rid of one of their bishops. However, you need to look a little deeper, because here, for example, h6 would be a great move, and if you continue by placing that knight on e6, well, that's going to be a very vulnerable pawn in the end, and likely it's just going to be lost after a timely queen to c8, for example, queen c8, and it's very difficult, in fact impossible really, to defend this pawn. So the point is, you want to be careful when you make transformations to a position like this, especially in pawn structures. You want to, be cautious about making a pawn that could be a huge target later on, one that could be very difficult to defend. Anyways, h6 was not played, and instead a5 was played, black trying to play now on the queen side and making this pressure dissipate a little bit. But indeed, b5, we have f4, and we have c5. White continuing to try to blast open the queen side very desperately. Queen b3, the king moves away from this diagonal, very natural play from both sides, bishop to b2. And here knight e8 was played, we have takes, and knight to g8. And this is a little strange. Here you should have just taken back. This move knight g8 is very weird. I mean, yes, you are trying to maybe reroute the knight a little bit, but it does allow for white to simply take this pawn for free. And in fact, after white took this pawn, they played knight e6, takes. Black continued by playing knight e6, still not recapturing the pawn, and finally knight e2, a4, the queen moves, we have c4, and knight takes b5. Black drawn to this pawn, which allows the bishop takes e5 idea, where now after takes, we have 3 of the 4 pawns. So how are we going to get a 4th pawn on the e-file? As a little trick, as a little puzzle, if you'd like, try to figure out maybe the series of moves. I know it's a very unorthodox puzzle in chess, but try to figure out how both players could orchestrate a situation where white gets this 4th pawn. Now, hopefully you noticed that it's likely going to be this f pawn. I mean, it's not even possible really for this a pawn, and this h pawn may be a little bit more realistic, but no way. So this f pawn really is going to come to this e3 square, so that explains queen to d3, and indeed you can already begin to see the idea. Takes, and we reach our 4 pawns in the center stacked. Now, unfortunately, as beautiful as this looks, it is not so effective because we do have good control on the D and F files, but if they just get a rook onto the E file, they could slowly pick up all of these pawns. And so, slowly but surely, black made some progress, destroyed this pawn formation here for white, and in the end managed to convert this position into a win. However, fear not. As I mentioned, there's a second example, and in this example, something really incredible happens. White not only gets 4 pawns, but wins the game as well. So as I mentioned, here is the second game. This one a little lower rated, but still both players above 2,300. So some of you might have expected this to be, you know, maybe 800 rated players playing the game, but no, these are serious players, and we get some pretty funky pawn formations. So knight e5, and I think here it's a little bit more self-explanatory what sort of happens. You can see there's a lot of pawn tension towards the center, especially with the possibility of going f4, that's another pawn. So white slowly manages to navigate through all of this pawn tension in a way that leads to 4 pawns stacked on the e-file. And we see this happening right around here. You can already see that after bishop takes, pawn takes, the knight hops in, and well, now we only have 3 pawns. So this g pawn actually also gets dragged into the mix. As you will see, the knight lands on a very dominant square on d6, the rook is forced to move, and now queen e2 comes. Point is, the queen is now more centralized, it has some effect on both sides of the board. And after the move rook to f8, rook c4, both rooks are getting coordinated on the c-file and they're getting stacked. We have the move f3, and after pawn takes f3, black took here the rook. And the continuation of this is that after we take and the king moves, well, suddenly we can capture twice. And so that's how this g2 pawn quickly transformed and shifted onto this e4 square. And now there's only one thing left to do. This d4 pawn realistically just needs to come to d5 and take this pawn on e6, and that is indeed what happens in this position. In just a few moves, we can see this move d5, queen to a4, hitting some other targets, and this is kind of what you're seeing because black has the choice to take here, but realistically they decide in both of our games really to move away and counterattack. And perhaps sometimes that's the best option, but it does allow us to get this very aesthetically pleasing formation for our pawns. And here we go. Now, in this case, as I mentioned, white is not only getting this pawn formation, they're also winning. And the reason for this is quite simple. This king is weak. These pawns are also uncontested. There's less defenders in black's camp to stop the simple idea of going e7, e8 queen, and maybe even going then e6, e7, e8 queen, e5, e6, e7, e8 queen, and maybe even e4, e5, e6, e7, e8 queen. And you don't get to say that too often in chess. So in this position, queen to b4, knight f7, the knight was very dangerous here, so it kind of had to get removed. Of course, also the obvious threat of queen h6 checkmate. So takes, and after rook f8, yes, we no longer have the 4 pawns, but the simple move check, king moves, and eventually e6 guarantees a win here because there's no realistic way to stop the promotion of one of these pawns. For example, queen f6 check, followed by the move e7. So hopefully you guys found this video enjoyable. Maybe you also took away some actual lessons and advice from this chess video. Make sure if you did enjoy it that you like the video and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.